Good evening. Is the truth about the brutality of the invaders and the descendants from the Delhi Sultanate to the Mughal Empire finally being reflected in our school textbooks? With me is the Class 8 school textbook of NCERT. And this book has sparked an intense debate after the National Council of Educational Research and Training, or NCERT, released a revised Class 8 social science textbook. Now, the revised textbook has amongst the darkest chapters of Indian history, but perhaps without the rose-tinted glasses. Of course, what's also unique, perhaps for the first time, we are learning and in detail about the indigenous resistance movement to the invaders and their descendants. The Ahoms, for example, the great Ahom general Lachit Borphukan and that battle of Saraighat, we are probably learning of it in our class 8 school textbook for the first time. We are learning much more about Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and the Hindvi Swaraj and Maharana Pratap and his resistance against the Mughals. This historical course correction is our top focus on India first, because there is an intense battle. There are those who say this is history being rewritten with a political agenda in mind.
NCERT course corrects history lessons. From Mughal brutality to Maratha pride. Opposition alleges history being hijacked.
टारगेट होना चाहिए कि आपको सिर्फ उनको नॉलेज देनी है, ना ये टारगेट होना चाहिए कि आपको नफरत फैलानी है, स्टूडेंट को उनके दिमाग में डालना है.
BJP defends historical truths.
गुरु तेग बहादुर जी की शहादत, गुरु अर्जुन देव जी की शहादत, वो सबके सब मुगलों के चलते हुई. तो ये तो कई साल पहले होना चाहिए था, जो अब भारत सरकार ने करना शुरू किया है.
Textbook, divisive ploy or course correction. Top focus on India first.
And during the course of the next half hour, I will read chapter and verse from this. The Mughal invader Babur, for example, has been described as brutal and ruthless conqueror. The book mentions how he slaughtered entire populations in cities and built symbolic towers of skull after the battles. Now, it also quotes contemporary Persian sources. It quotes the Baburnama, for example. Akbar, incidentally, remember, all through our lives in school, we've learned Akbar the Great. Akbar here, for the first time, perhaps has been portrayed as a mix, both of tolerance and of violence. And violence, you remember the massacre of 30,000 Hindus after the siege of Chittorgarh. It notes Akbar's orders to destroy temples and promote Islam. I'll tell you about Aurangzeb during the course of this broadcast. I'm Gaurav Sawant. As always, let's get started with the headlines on India. Rahul Gandhi escalates war against the Election Commission, says lakhs of names scrapped from the voters list in Bihar, accuses the Election Commission of removing names of Congress party supporters. Massive protest outside the Odisha Assembly over a Balasore student's death. Water cannons used to disperse the crowd. Distraught father breaks down, talking to India Today, calls the young student's death murder. Mamata Banerjee leads a massive TMC march in Kolkata, claims Bengalis are being targeted in BJP-ruled states. TMC launches Bengal Pride War, asks why so much hatred against the Bengalis. Karnataka scraps aerospace land acquisition after calling it damaging for livelihoods of farmers. Now ready for a U-turn after Andhra Pradesh government offers land. Karnataka now says they'll offer new land. Maharashtra Minister stokes language controversy, calls for azan in Marathi. Congress hits back, says language and religion are separate. I want to quote from this class 8 history textbook, NCERT textbook, about Aurangzeb, which says he was a brutal and ruthless conqueror. He slaughtered entire populations of cities. He enslaved women and children, and he took pride in erecting big towers of skull made from the slaughtered people of the cities Babur plundered in India. This book also talks about Akbar. It says Akbar ordered the massacre of some 30,000 civilians, and the surviving women and children of Chittorgarh were enslaved. Generations that learnt Akbar the Great, perhaps for the first time, will also be learning the truth about how Akbar sent out this victory message. This victory message that said, we've succeeded in occupying a number of forts and towns that belong to infidels, kafirs. Those who don't believe in Islam, Hindus were called kafirs, and established Islam there with the help of our bloodthirsty sword, and destroyed temples in all those places all over Hindustan. This is in this history textbook. Now, are facts being revealed for the first time, or is there merit in opposition saying that there is a political agenda that is being pursued here? India Today's Milan Sharma gets you a top story.
The chapter 2 in the theme B starts with a note on history's darker period, so which mentions how these chapters of Indian history have been darkest hours for the country.
History Wars are back. The NCERT's latest social sciences textbook for class 8th has a chapter on Mughals and Delhi Sultanate, which mention instances of religious intolerance and carries a note on what it calls some darker periods in history. In the textbook, Babur, the founder of Mughal Empire, is described as a brutal and ruthless conqueror, while Akbar's rule is portrayed as a blend of brutality and intolerance, detailing the massacre of 30,000 people during his attack on the Rajput fort of Chittorgarh, and the attacks on the Hindu temples by Sultanate ruler Alauddin Khilji are detailed. The Mughal jizya tax levied on non-Muslims is described as a tool of public humiliation.
They also talk about how the sultans imposed a tax called jizya, which was subjected to all the non-Muslims subjects who were also called infidels. And of course, they were either told to pay the tax, or formed a financial and social incentive for subjects to convert to Islam. So the religion conversions that were happening, the book also is talking about that.
The NCERT has added a disclaimer, a note on some darker periods in history, which states no one should be held responsible today for events of the past. The note appears to be aimed at discouraging communal interpretations.
मुझे लगता है टारगेट क्या होना चाहिए? टारगेट होना चाहिए कि आपको सिर्फ उनको नॉलेज देनी है, ना ये टारगेट होना चाहिए कि आपको नफरत फैलानी है, स्टूडेंट को उनके दिमाग में डालना है.
The opposition has alleged the change in a bid to hijack history and spread hate and communalism.
जिस तरह हमारे इतिहास को हाईजैक करने की प्रयास कर रहे हैं, ये हमारे बच्चों की, हमारी जनरेशन की पढ़ाई में जो सांप्रदायिकता की बीज डालने का प्रयास कर रहे हैं, ये बेहद गलत है.
The ND, on the other hand, has defended the changes.
गुरु तेग बहादुर जी की शहादत, गुरु अर्जुन देव जी की शहादत, वो सबके सब मुगलों के चलते हुई. तो ये तो कई साल पहले होना चाहिए था, जो अब भारत सरकार ने करना शुरू किया है.
ये पढ़ाई जाती थी पहले, ट्रेड टू टेरिटरी।
Do the NCERT textbooks try to portray history more correctly, or is at an attempt to influence young minds? The jury is divided. With Milan Sharma, Bureau Report, India Today.
So, are these dark chapters of Indian history finally not being seen through rose tinted glasses? We have throughout our lives, when we were in school, learnt Akbar the Great. But our school students now finally, and perhaps for the first time, learn of the siege of Chittorgarh and the massacre of 30,000 Hindus, enslavement of Hindu women and Hindu children, destruction of Hindu, Buddhist and Jain temples, and the spread of Islam through the bloodthirsty sword of Akbar. And these are not our words, Akbar's message after the victory of Chittor. Joining me on India First, Anand Ranganathan, author and consulting editor, Swaraj. Garima Mehra Dasauni is the spokesperson of the Congress Party. Professor Rakesh Sinha is former member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha of the BJP. Sanjay Jha, formerly of the Congress, joins us as a political analyst. I first want to cut across to India Today's Milan Sharma, who broke the story and joins us on this broadcast. Milan, explain the rationale of these changes, and is there merit that only Islamic invaders and their descendants, they are being targeted? What are the changes in this new history book?
Well, Gaurav, first of all, these changes were long overdue because the national education policy has brought in these changes now, but a revision was overdue since 2005. So had the curriculum been changed step by step, people would not have been suddenly screaming that this is anti-Muslim or anti-Islam. Secondly, fact is a fact. All the things that are written in the textbook, whether the Mughals plundered, looted, invaded, how the Delhi Sultanate was established, how the Mughals were, killing Marathas, how they were behind killings of and enslavement of women and children, how they tortured people, how they did forced religious conversions, they are all facts. So when you talk about facts, these things cannot be looked aside. For years, we had been studying how Akbar and Birbal stories were taught to children, how Mughal rulers were intellectual, they were culturally driven. We used to read about their taxation, about their financial systems, but we never read about the atrocities that were inflicted on the people of Bharat at that point of time. And that is something that the NCERT is making very clear was the darkest hour of Indian history, and a spade should be called a spade, and that is how the book needs to be projected.
Stay with me. Let me bring in Garima Mehra Dasauni in this conversation. Garima, the NCERT textbook says, and I quote, understanding the historical origin of cruel violence, abusive misrule or misplaced ambition of power is the best way to heal the past and build a future where hopefully there will be no place. These will have no place. So why does the Congress or some in the Congress believe that this move is not above board?
Good evening to all. Thank you for having me on your show, Gaurav. Well, there is no denying that our medieval period had some darkest moments, but the question is, why bring this darkness and frame it in such a sensational way? What good it is going to do to the young and impressionable minds of the class 8 students? I mean, history is to educate, it is not to instigate. What do you want our class 8 child to have a revengeful feeling, to have a vengeance or hatredness inside him? So basically, we are not saying that it is anti-Muslim or you're targeting one particular community. We are against the fact that if somebody has to, do an in-depth study of history, whatever happened in the Mughal Kal or whatever happened in the medieval period, he can do it in BA or MA history. Why at all there is a need to include this syllabus in class 8? I mean, why can't you teach the kids? Why can't you teach those innocent children the integrity, the solidarity, the unity of our country. So many, despite so many invaders, we stood with each other, and there was still the unity amongst us. Unanimous रोमा सब मिट
Anand
गए
Rangan.
जहां से, बाकी
Okay.
मगर है अब तक नामो निशा हमारा. कुछ बात है कि हस्ती मिटती नहीं हमारी, सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे जहां हमारा. Why can't we
Okay.
teach this to our children, that the invaders came, they crushed our culture, but we stood united?
Okay, so you do concede that invaders crushed our culture. Anand Ranganathan.
Definitely, all of them.
Okay.
What did
Okay.
Ashoka do? What did Ashoka do in the
Ashoka
Kalinga
was
War?
not an
He
invader.
took to
Ashoka was
Buddhism.
not an invader. Ashoka was
No,
not
I
an
know
invader.
that,
But
that was a
my question
medieval
was very
center.
specific,
What I
and
want to
it wasn't even
emphasize
in
here
medieval
is,
period.
what
But
I want to
be that
emphasize
as it
here,
may,
Gaurav,
be
is
that
that
as
the
it may.
medieval period was full of destruction. You cannot segregate. You know,
Okay.
the warriors or the kings, you cannot segregate. There are so many examples where, why don't we talk about British colonial power? Why
Okay.
are we sparing them all those harsh words, harsh descriptions? They also, look at the Indians, what atrocities they did to us. Why are we sparing
Okay.
the British colonial period?
Fair enough. Anand Ranganathan, you want to respond to these points? Also, Brinda Karat of the CPIM says NCERT today actually means National Communal Education System, and an attempt is being made to hijack history to pursue a political agenda or words to that effect, sir.
Good evening, Gaurav, and good evening to my fellow panelists. This is the first time hearing that telling the facts is a form of Islamophobia and spreading hatred. But we are getting used to it. We have been for 75 years. As I say, nations weaken not because of their past, Gaurav, but rather by how they are taught it. And for 75 years, we've been taught to forget historical injustices, to eulogize genocidal mass murderers. So India is a nation that glorifies self-loathing and self-flagellation in equal measure. A nation where people still go and pray at the grave of Aurangzeb, who imposed tax only on non-Muslims, beheaded Guru Tegh Bahadur, entombed Sahibzadas alive, decapitated Sambhaji Maharaj, demolished Kashi Vishwanath, murdered 4.6 million Hindus. Aurangzeb and Babur were Baghdadi and Bin Laden 350 years before ISIS and Al-Qaeda. There is no difference between Aurangzeb apologists and Holocaust deniers. Twisted mind in need of medical intervention, but it's not the fault of these demented brainwashed zombies, Gaurav. It is our fault. It is the fault of what our school textbooks taught them. Tell me, is there a Hitler Road in Tel Aviv? Do you tell Germans, do not read the truth about Hitler while you are in school? We'll tell you while you are in university. This is a nation that hasn't read the authentic biography of Aurangzeb Masir Alamgiri that says in 1669, on orders of Aurangzeb, the Kashi temple was demolished. That in 1670, on orders of Aurangzeb, the Keshav Dev temple, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, was demolished, and Aurangzeb had idols brought to Agra to be scattered under the steps of Jahanara Mosque, so they'll be trodden on. So you have in this country Nehru asserting that, quote, Babur was one of the most cultured and delightful persons one could meet. He was a gallant knight. There was no sectarianism in Babur. There was no religious bigotry. This is from Nehru's own book that is prescribed in schools, Glimpses of World History. This despite Babur saying it himself in Baburnama, that quote, I was a wanderer for the sake of Islam and battled infidels and Hindus, determined to become a martyr. But thanks be to Allah, I became a Ghazi, killer of infidels. Another cannot spread by WhatsApp Islamist historians and their white masters, Gaurav, is that India prospered economically during the Mughal period. This is a blatant lie, disproved by data provided by historians and economists such as Madison, Broadberry, and Custodis. India's
I'll
share
come
of
to
world
economics.
actually declined after 300 years.
Okay, I'll come to economics in just a moment, but I want to stay on just these very basics that you have raised and very pertinent points that you've raised. Sanjay Jha, you heard both the Congress Party spokesperson and Dr. Anand Ranganathan that do you learn one history in school and then another history in college? Throughout our school lives, we've learned Akbar the Great, but clearly history shows he was enslaving Hindu women, he was enslaving Hindu children, he was breaking Hindu, Buddhist and Jain temples, spreading Islam through that bloodthirsty sword. And there is no greatness in any of this. So school students can't learn Akbar the Great and college students learn of the real Akbar.
Gaurav, good evening. It so happens by coincidence that I'm a student of both economics as well as history. So I'll give you a very frank perspective. There is history and there is one truth. However, we all know that there are going to be ideological differences between not just political parties in a society. There are people who are conservative. There are some people who have a more forgiving disposition. There are some who look at a different aspect of India's past. And, you can call it rose tinted, or you can call it, a degree of venomous prejudice. It can take any kind of shape. I am very open as an individual and as somebody being in politics to listening to both sides of a story. The first assumption that we need to understand, and to your viewers, whom I hugely respect, is that no individual in the world, today or in the past, is monochromatic. There's no great, because everyone has a dark side. And if someone is bad, they also have a side which may be extremely appreciative and very something that we can be, kind of inspired by. So, human beings are complicated, political leaderships even more so. So here is my point. The reason why you are finding such an criticism of the NCERT is largely driven by what I call as the environment that we are in at the moment. And I'll give you one example. I'm very open to any interpretation of history. But when I have people from the BJP, and you're talking about very tall leaders, Anand is a well-read man, and I would invite him to comment on this as well. When you have leaders from the BJP who say that the Taj Mahal is a construct of traitors, when you have leaders from the right wing who say that actually it was never a tomb or a mausoleum, it was actually founded on a temple. When you have people saying that end of day, one of the modern 7 wonders of the world, which attracts 6 million tourists, actually is not to be even respected and talked about because it is part of our past, it tells you that we have a problem. And that problem is that we are running away from our past. And nobody is going to deny that all the emperors that have been mentioned, they did commit horrific acts of violence on women, children, including temples. Nobody's going to deny that. But can we also not deny
But
that the
was
Prime
it
Minister,
mentioned in
Mr.
our
Modi,
history books so
and everybody
far?
speaks from the Red Fort for a reason? There's a reason why you speak from the
Was
Red
it
Fort.
mentioned in our textbooks all along? Or were we taught Akbar the Great and we were taught not as much, and perhaps for the first time, I have Professor Suraj Yadav also joining me on the broadcast. Perhaps for the first time, we are also learning in our school textbooks in great detail about the indigenous resistance to invaders and their descendants. But Professor Rakesh Sinha respond to the criticism that these are seeds of communalism that are being planted and very early in school, highlighting these historical brutality of invaders and their descendants.
The history written in the last 7 decades before the BJP came into the power, not based on the historical perspective, but it was an ideological construct. And this ideological construct had 3 components: colonial philosophy, Nehruvian idea, and Marxist ideology. All these 3 hybrid created the Indian history. I have a simple question. Any rule or any government is known by the social philosophy it follows. What is the good work and bad work? I am giving an example. In my village area, someone killed a young lady's father. And after that, he reached to that lady, that young girl, to arrange the marriage. Then someone can ask that you have to explain both the good and bad side. The bad side is that he killed, and good side that he is helping the marriage. So here the basic philosophy of the Mughal rule was the brutality on Hindus, conversion of Hindus, destruction of the Hindu temples. So India's basic philosophy, fundamental philosophy of the unity and the cooperation, that multiculturalism, was destroyed by the Mughal rule. I am asking the question, why Guru Tegh Bahadur was assassinated? Let Brinda Karat answer it. Why he was assassinated? Just for land, for the state, for jamindari? No, not at all. He stood for, I say he stood for the right right of freedom of religion. He is the only person in the entire civilization history that who stood for the right for the freedom of religion. I am not talking only India. I am talking about all over the world, all civilizations. Guru Tegh Bahadur. Second question, that two miners, Fateh Singh and Jorwar Singh, the sons of Guru Gobind Singh, yes, they were assassinated, martyrdom of. Yes. What are the reasons? Joravar Singh and Fateh Singh, what was the reason? So the question is not that, what is bad and good. The question is that the basic trait and tradition of the Hindu civilization was accommodating the other religions. There can be feud, there can be battle between the two kings. But that battle cannot be, Ashoka's battle cannot be compared with Aurangzeb's atrocities.
Okay.
He killed his
but
Dara
that's a very
Shikoh.
pertinent
Dara
point that
Shikoh was the
you
first
mentioned.
One in Indian history. I'm ending. Just give me 30 seconds. Dara Shikoh was the first man. These pseudo-secular call of the Ganga Jamuni Sanskriti. He innovated the Ganga Jamuni Sanskriti terminology and the narrative, and he was killed because he translated Upanishad. He was a practicing Muslim. He was not the non-practicing Muslim. He was killed by Aurangzeb. So it was not merely the battle for power. Power battle. It was also the philosophy which he wanted to impose, and that's why NCERT, Nehruvian NCERT could not erode the oral history of India. Oral history of India remains so powerful that it dominated, ultimately it prevailed, and telling truth to the children is not a crime. A crime is that not telling the truth.
Give me a moment. I want to get.
They were the butchers, killers.
Okay,
Gaurav,
there's
may
breaking news. Breaking news. Yes, I'm coming to you. NCERT has just reacted. Before I come to Professor Yadav, I would just want to bring in what the NCERT has said in that statement. And Milan will just get us details. Milan, the textbook attempts to provide an idea about geography, history, both medieval and modern, economic life and governance of the country from a multidisciplinary perspective in an integrated way. Milan, bring us details what this means, and perhaps does this answer the question that Garima had raised, that why only Mughals and why not the British?
Well, Gaurav, this statement that has come forward from the NCERT is clearly saying that they want children to understand about our past between the 13th to the mid-19th century, and how the various events of that period have helped to shape and influence the evolution of India that is today. And the aim has been to consistently avoid attempts to load the child with too much information and to develop a critical understanding of the subject. And again, they say that because this is being presented in a comprehensive manner and the holistic learning of the textbook is more important, facts have been presented in this textbook based on well-known primary, secondary academic sources, which obviously says the note that they have put that this was history's darker period on page 20 has been added for the benefit of the readers. Also, Gaurav would like to add, many would question why this kind of Mughal or Delhi Sultanate brutality is being shown in class 8. Well, the NCERT syllabus makers feel that class 8 is the last year of the middle stage school, and then you enter class 9. So there has to be a context, there has to be a background to what you're going to study further. And that really was missing in the previous textbooks where we only learnt the culture and the history, but we never learned the brutality, we never learnt about how much we suffered during that reign. And that is the reason that NCERT brings a comprehensive syllabus. It's not just on
Professor Yadav.
Yeah.
Okay, Professor Yadav, you heard Professor Sinha clearly mention that words to the effect that we've read a rose-tinted version of history. For example, when you learn of Akbar the Great, or when you learn about the Mughals and whatever happened, you don't read about how Guru Tegh Bahadur was assassinated in Delhi. He was beheaded. 4 of his followers, Bhai Matidas, Bhai Satidas, Bhai Dayal Singh, the manner in which they were killed by that cruel bigot Aurangzeb. So all of those facts need to be in public domain so that people have a correct perspective, not just of the invaders, their descendants, but also of the indigenous resistance movement.
Gaurav, you have raised a very pertinent question. The real facts, the problem is this all development in the history books falls in the line of the fascist ideology of Bharatiya Janata Party and RSS. Have you heard which Hindu are you talking about? In the Mughal period, you have Man Singh, you have this Tan Sen, and all these people who are closely associated with Akbar, his rule, who are the ones who were converted. Nobody was converted on the might of the sword. People were actually much more under duress of Brahminism than what you are talking about Mughal. Have you heard about Nangeli? Have the history books taught about the breast tax by Brahmins on Dalit women and how a girl had to protest against that by cutting her breast? Has the Tipu Sultan, when he passed an order against levying the tax on Dalits and the lower caste, the Brahmins were really disturbed. So all these people who are now in power, they were in power then also, and they are now putting out facts of history. And all these years, in world over, you discuss about the ideological and various interpretations of the accepted facts.
Sir,
But here
the
the
point
whole
that you are
facts
making
are
is
the
nobody
point.
was
What I'm
converted
making is
under
the
sword. Why
no.
was
The
Guru Tegh
point
Bahadur? Why
I'm
was Guru
making is
Tegh Bahadur
no.
assassinated
Why are you
in
just
Delhi,
talking about
in
Tegh Bahadur?
outside Chandni
Why
Chowk?
why
Why do you
why
have
aren't
Gurdwara
you
Seesganj? I'm
talking
sorry.
about
You
no?
must
Why
answer.
aren't
Why
you
was Guru
talking
Tegh
about
Bahadur
Gaurav, give me 30
assassinated?
seconds.
and you have just mentioned do you know how Pushyamitra Sung, how did he kill the Buddhist
So
monks?
you will go back
Have
to
that been
Pushyamutra
taught?
Shung, but you will not talk about Aurangzeb
No, we
assassinating
will
Guru
talk.
Tegh
We
Bahadur.
will talk, but we will
But you're
not allow
not.
you to
My
just
question to you was very specific.
you will
My
not
question to you was very specific. But anyway, Anand Ranganathan wants to quickly come in, as does Professor Rakesh Sinha, and then I'll come to Garima also. I want to, diverting this debate from the points that I am raising, sir. Permit me to raise a
you are
point.
not raising the
I
point.
raised a point. You said it's a pertinent point, but don't worry. Be that as it may, Anand
You are
Ranganathan,
talking
you
about
wanted to
Muslim
respond.
atrocity.
You wanted
You are
to.
Gaurav,
not talking
Yes,
about Brahmin
only,
Gaurav,
atrocity, which
only
is
Gaurav,
Anand
still going on.
Ranganathan.
Gaurav,
Anand Ranganathan.
the tragedy is not that a student is spreading these blatant WhatsApp lies. The tragedy is that a professor right now on your panel is spreading. There is no such thing as the breast tax. It has been proven time and again. Historically, it's a figment of the imagination of these people. But let me not waste my time there. I want to appreciate what Sanjay Jha said, because what he says is right. Every king, every leader had a shade of gray. Now, it is, according to him, in his words, it is also important to appreciate the good qualities. But then I ask, A, it is not bad enough that we've hidden the bad qualities of all these emperors. Tell me, what do you want to appreciate in Hitler? If you believe Hitler also had a shade of gray, would you say that Hitler was a fantastic watercolor painter? No, there are some things that have to be condemned. And as far as the Congress leader is concerned, immediately she resorted to whataboutery, saying, well, you're talking about the barbarism of Babur. What about the Hindu king Ashoka? What about his? Well, the tragedy, again, the irony is that in our school textbooks, we aren't even taught that when Ashoka perpetrated killing lakhs during the Battle of Kalinga, he was already a Buddhist for 4 to 8 years. We have been taught that he saw all that devastation and converted to Buddhism. I'm sure the Congress leader doesn't even know that he was already a Buddhist king. This is the tragedy in this country.
Quick
We
rejoinder to
shy away
Anand.
from telling the truth.
Okay.
And unless we do that, unless we show the truth, I'm afraid it is back to square one.
Okay, quick rejoinder. You wanted to come in, Sanjay Jha, before I go to the next point, which is equally important. Go on, sir.
Yeah. Anand raised a pertinent point about Adolf Hitler. And in fact, I wanted to talk about this subject. If, I don't know how many people have visited the concentration camps in Germany, but I think we should get inspired by the way the Germans have done it. I've been to the Dachau concentration camp. I haven't been to Auschwitz. But, Gaurav, here is a lesson for us that end of day, you should never run away from your past, good, bad, or ugly. The Germans have still preserved the torture cells and those horrific gas chambers as a reminder that we should not make the same mistakes again. And here is my point on your program, and maybe Sinaji can comment on it as well, that why do we, like for example, in Amritsar, every time I've gone to Amritsar, you pay homage at the Jallianwala
Jallianwala Bagh.
Bagh memorial,
Yes.
right? I can tell you that in 1984, more people died actually during that horrific Sikh genocide. Similarly, in Gujarat 2002 riots, more people died in the pogrom that happened. Why are we not having the courage to accept today about Muzaffarnagar, about Delhi riots, about Manipur, about any of
Okay,
the riots of the
since the
past?
debate today
Why
is this
don't we
history
have the
book,
courage to have a
since the
memorial for
debate
all
today is
those
this
who
history
have
book,
died
I
an
will stay
innocent
on this
death?
history book because Garima
Yes,
Mehra Dasani, we can go why not this and why not that, but can we restrict ourselves to this history book for the debate today? This history book also talks of the valor of the brave Ahoms, the fierce warriors who never let invaders set foot in their territory. And that's been mentioned for the first time in this book. General Lachit Borphukan and the defeat of a far superior Mughal army. Isn't this good that it's finally being mentioned that history is not just about one dynasty here or there? It's a more holistic nationwide approach, madam.
Exactly, you have answered my question, Gaurav. That is what I mean to say. That India's greatness lies in the rich plural past. You cannot just, segregate it into vilifying or magnifying a community's ancestors and their deeds. I mean to say the disclaimer, the two-line disclaimer that nobody today is responsible for what happened in the past because the makers of this syllabus knew what they are doing to the young minds. My only question is why these small kids have to undergo your dirty politics and they are, used as a tool for your communal ideology. Why are you doing this to them? This is my
Okay.
question. And
Professor Rakesh Sinha,
secondly,
quickly
let
respond
me
to
let
a
me ask
political
you one
question
thing.
being raised.
Gaurav, one last question. Gaurav, one last question. One last question. Here, everybody is emphasizing on facts being facts. So it was a fact that Shama Prasad Mukherjee, Savarkar, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, they
Again,
all
can
wrote
I restrict
letters to the
myself to
Britishers.
this book
They
today
all wrote
and we will
letters
come back
to
to
the
other
Britishers
points, but
pleading for
okay, I want to
forgiveness
bring in, I am
during
sorry, I'm
our
not letting
freedom
anybody
struggle.
digress from this
They be a
book,
part
which
of
is
this
the
book?
subject of the
Shouldn't,
debate
shouldn't,
today. But
shouldn't,
Rakesh Sinha, quickly
shouldn't
respond
that,
to the point
shouldn't
raised by
those
Garima.
letters be a part of this book also that Shama Prasad Mukherjee and Savarkar were
Gaurav,
pleading for
I
forgiveness?
stressed it that oh,
That's, but anyway,
say, it is tragedy
it's
that
modern Indian history, as my colleague points out, but go
it is
on,
tragedy that
go on, sir.
it is tragedy that they are comparing Mughals with the Muslims. Then the colonial rule was a basically Christian rule. So we should not talk about the Jallianwala Bagh Kand because General Dyer was a Christian. Then you will say that you are hurting the Christians. It is not the matter of the religion. It is a matter of the religious philosophy of the Mughal. The religious philosophy was the atrocities of the Hindus. We are the nation state not born in 1947 or 1857. We are a nation state with a civilizational history. It was an attack on the civilization and every child, even the class 3 children should be taught that Aurangzeb was a butcher and we should prepare our children for the future history, for the future civilizational consolidation. We cannot tolerate. India was divided so many times. India had been attacked so many times and so many invaders came. The multiculturalism does not mean that I am quoting Vinoba Bhave. He used to say Bhi Sanskriti or Hi Sanskriti. Bhi means this is also. The He means this is the only way. So it is a battle between the only way and the one of the ways. Indian tradition is the one of the ways. And they
Professor
are
Yadav,
supporting, I don't
Professor
know
Yadav,
why Indian Marxists and Nehruvians have so much love for the Mughals.
Okay, that of course is another part of the debate. But Professor Yadav, there is also focus in
Gaurav,
this book, and I will
my
restrict
only
myself
point
to
is
this
don't.
book. I'm sorry, I'm staying on this book, and I want to bring in Professor
Will you
Yadav.
allow me
The
to make my
resistance.
point?
If you stay on the topic, yes. If you
Of course,
digress,
I'm
no.
staying on the
I'm
point.
being very clear because
People,
time is
people
at a premium on
who
my
are
show.
spreading
Please be
lies
very
on
clear about that.
WhatsApp are trying
The
to say
resistance
that
of the indigenous people, if you want to hear me, take my question. The resistance by the indigenous people of Bharat, the Bhils, the Gonds, the Santals, the Kots, the resistance of conversion to Islam, Rani Durgavati, for example. She fought Akbar, the so-called Akbar the Great. Now, that's also mentioned in this book. Is this now taking a wider perspective, sir?
Exactly. What my point is, when you are talking about history, it has to be in the perspective of history. You cannot put your today's ideas and ideologies into past and then interpret it in your own way. Now, what happened to Maratha? You just spoke about the atrocity and how Maratha resistance was to the Mughals. You should be knowing that when Shambhaji and or Shivaji had to be crowned, no Brahmin would agree to do the
Yes,
coronation.
it's a
Ganga
fact,
Bhatt
and that
was
is why
called. No, no, you.
from
Why
Kashi,
don't you want to
absolutely.
listen? You
No,
are
but
just some
that's a
few
fact.
upper caste trying to create history for your own self and then teaching them to all the Indians. This will not be
Okay.
tolerated.
Okay,
I'm trying to.
Milan Sharma wants to respond to you, Dr. Yadav. Milan, go on.
Sir, we've been learning caste system within the textbooks as a separate topic. Nowhere in the entire syllabus or curriculum of the Indian studies has caste system been removed. We have been learning about the Brahmins, the lower caste, the upper caste, and how lower castes
you
were
have removed
mistreated.
certain
And
things.
that does not erase the
Brahmanism
fact
word
that
has
that
been
has
removed.
happened in the past.
Brahmanism
But
word
that
has
does
been
not mean that we
removed.
confuse it with how, the Mughal history and invaders came in and, meted out these brutal atrocities on people living here. And for generations now, we had been reading about how the Marathas were defeated. We were reading, and the narrative was just the reverse, that the Marathas were defeated, and we never read about it in such a way that the Marathas tried to fight and fight again until
Not
they were
just
tortured.
fight and fight again. They ensured that the Mughals were defeated, which we've never been taught. What we've also not been taught is the fact how the Sikhs rose and how the Sikhs, the indigenous resistance movement of this country, or how Jahangir tortured the 5th Sikh Guru, Guru Arjan Dev, how Aurangzeb ordered the beheading of the 9th Sikh Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur, and the assassination of the 4 Sahibzades. All of that must be taught and in the correct perspective. I've run out of time for facts to be known. Those who don't learn from history, I will tell you what is the motive, madam. Those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. So let's not repeat
It was the
history.
heart of darkness. Mughal rule was the heart of darkness of Indian
That is something that you must learn. Learn from history so that
Those who are
once again
defending
you're not
Mughal rules,
condemned
they
to
should know
repeat
that
it. But
it
that's
was
a
the
debate for
period of
another
heart
time.
of darkness.
I've run out of time on this part of the debate. Atmanirbhar Bharat is essential for victory in conflict. This is one of the biggest lessons from India's Operation Sindoor, and Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan has given a clarion call on self-reliance in defense. He was speaking specially on disruptive technologies. For example, unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, and counter unmanned aerial vehicle systems, or counter UAS. Now, in a very powerful statement, General Chauhan said India must not depend entirely on foreign technology or foreign weapons or foreign systems when it comes to warfare. Because remember, we've suffered in the past when post-Pokhran sanctions were imposed on India. Our entire Sea King and Sea Harrier fleet was virtually grounded because neither the Americans nor the British were giving Indians spares. So what's the road ahead? We bring you more in this report.
Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan calls for indigenous drone and counter UAV capability, terming it a strategic necessity for India.
Their unbridled and rampant use in modern-day conflicts proved not only their utility but also their ubiquity. They augment manned systems and enable militaries to conduct simultaneous operations across multiple domains with fewer resources and minimal danger to human lives.
General Chauhan highlighted how Operation Sindoor has shown the importance of indigenously developed drones.
Operation Sindoor has showed us as to why indigenously developed counter-US systems and counter-US systems built for our terrain and our needs are crucial. We cannot rely on imported niche technology that are crucial for our offensive and defensive missions. We must invent and build and safeguard ourselves.
He revealed that on May 10th, Pakistan used unarmed drones and loitering munitions during the conflict.
During Operation Sindoor, on 10th of May, Pakistan had used unarmed drones and loitering munitions. None of them actually could inflict any damage to Indian military or civilian infrastructure. Most of them were neutralized through a combination of kinetic and non-kinetic means, and some of them, in fact, could be recovered in almost intact conditions.
The CDS made it clear India can't afford to rely on foreign technology for crucial combat capabilities.
If you are developing systems which you own, their capabilities are not known to the enemy, and that may add an element of surprise when actually you're face to face in the initial encounters at least.
Amid the call for Atmanirbharta, India is scaling up drone innovation. From the battlefield to the labs, it is clear the era of self-reliant defense is here. Bureau Report, India Today.
From Azerbaijan, Armenia to Israel, Hamas to Russia, Ukraine, and of course India's Operation Sindoor, we very clearly learned that disruptive technology is an absolute game changer. And that is why India has to be Atmanirbhar. That's essential to win when it comes to quality, quantity upgrades, drones and counter-drone system. Joining me on this India Today special broadcast is senior journalist and my colleague Sandeep Unithan. Sandeep, disruptive technology. Where do we stand today vis-a-vis not just Pakistan, but Pakistan, as Deputy Chief General Rahul Singh pointed out, Pakistan and China and Turkey operating in tandem, especially when it comes to their UCAVs, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, their long-range, high-altitude drones, medium-endurance drones, and long-endurance drones.
Well, Gaurav, we held ourselves up quite well during Operation Sindoor. We deployed a range of indigenous drones. But, you know, what the Chief of Defense Staff is literally saying is that we have to look out for the future because the enemy already knows the kind of capabilities we've shown in this round. We have to be Atmanirbhar. We have to ensure that the entire drone ecosystem is is indigenous, because there have been concerns in the past that a lot of these components, flight controllers, the most crucial part of this were from our northern neighbor, because China has such a vice grip on the entire drone ecosystem. They're literally miles ahead of the rest of the world. They're even supplying components and parts to the Russian Federation for its war in Ukraine. But the Chief of Defense Staff is talking about looking at a new range of Indian solutions for Indian wars, and drones are very key to that. And the most important thing, Gaurav, is that while we've seen drones flying at the usual speeds, you have those quadcopter kind of drones, the hobby drones which fly at slow speeds, something like 50 to 100 kilometers an hour. You need a new era of fast-powered, jet-powered drones which fly at fast speeds, 500, 600. All of these are, 500, 600 kilometers an hour. Many of these are already in the testing stage. The Air Force has ordered several of these a few years back. These we are being given to understand are being inducted slowly, these jet-powered drones. And there is a huge opportunity here, Gaurav, as the Chief of Defense Staff mentioned, for Indian indigenous defense. There's something like 40,000 crore worth of emergency purchases. A lot of them are drones that are going to happen over the next couple of months. So huge opportunity.
And you need all sorts of drones. You need drones with jet engines, unmanned combat aerial vehicles. Group Captain Augustine Vinod joins me on this broadcast. Group Captain Vinod, you've been a former fighter pilot, a Mirage 2000 pilot, but you're also associated with the drone ecosystem. Where do we stand today when it comes to one, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, those jet-powered engines, jet engines, and two, on stealth unmanned combat aerial vehicles?
Great question, Gaurav. In fact, I remember talking to you a couple of years ago, I think 3 years ago, on this very particular subject about the RCS of a drone. The radar cross-section of the drone in itself is so small that it is smaller than a stealth fighter. So the aim of a stealth fighter like F-35 or AMCA or whatever is going to come up in the future, aim is to reduce the radar cross-section in the drone. It is very small. The one which is right behind me, the radar cross-section, we measured this on the on an equipment. The radar cross-section is something like 2 square centimeters. So it is very, very small. So detecting these drones using radar is going to be A, difficult, B, it's going to be at very close range. Second and most important thing, Gaurav, is why the world suddenly is waking up to this, the new weapon called, ubiquitous weapon called drone. because of its success in Ukraine-Russia war. It's when Ukraine hit these most strategic fighters in Russia with impunity, and it's not so much of success when Pakistan tried to hit us, and we countered it with D4 systems. So now the world has understood the beast of this drone. If you tame this beast correctly, if you design this beast correctly, if you have the adequate safeguards in this beast, it is unbeatable. Else, it will fall, like evening bug. So that is one aspect.
And when you look at India's drone ecosystem, Sandeep, the private sector is being roped in a very big way to go in for high-end technology. That will be essential. But how much is the private sector being able to rise to the occasion?
Well, Gaurav, the private sector has delivered on some very significant projects. There are jet-powered drones that the Indian Air Force has ordered from the private sector. There's a weapon called the Suresh Shastra, which was ordered about 2 years back. These we are given to understand are going to be the drone swarms of the future. These are being acquired in numbers, in the hundreds. But of course, the Air Force would want them in the thousands because these have to be brought in significant numbers to offset your adversary's capabilities. So the private sector has really risen to the occasion, Gaurav. It has filled in the gaps which the DRDO has kind of allowed them to fill in. While the DRDO looks at bigger systems, strategic systems, there has been a conscious decision to bring the private sector into the low end of the spectrum, the small quadcopter drones, the slower flying drones, the tactical drones. All of that has been left wide open for the private sector. And of course, we've seen a number of companies come in. There have been some very remarkable Indian Air Force projects like the Meher Babar Swarm Drone Contest that have literally seeded, entire drone ecosystems. I mean, that was something that the Air Force created with very little investments. And today you have a very large drone ecosystem worth tens of thousands of crores. So the government is fully aware of the need for creating this drone ecosystem where the private sector is a very, very big part of this entire ecosystem.
And that next big weapon system, and you'll hear much more on it on Battle Cry, and Group Captain Augustine Vinod and Sandeep Unithan will be joining me there, is on the stealth unmanned combat aerial vehicle. So you'll have manned, unmanned tandem teams in operations. Where are we on that? How fast do we need to move? Because this is a very uncertain environment where the government has very clearly said Sindoor is still on. We'll be tracking that story closely. Group Captain Vinod, my apologies, I've run out of time on this part of the show, but lots more on the Battle Cry over the weekend. A quick break, news and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.